They told me my dock was a danger, a violation, something that had to come down. Can you imagine hearing that about a place you built with your own hands, a haven that stood strong for over a decade? I'm Tom Whitaker, 56, a retired boat mechanic who spent more years fixing engines than I care to count. I moved to Willow Lake, a quiet corner of northern Michigan, for mornings where the only sound was water lapping against wood. That dock wasn't just planks and bolts. It was where my daughter learned to swim, where my dad taught me to tie a sailor's knot before cancer took him. 12 years of memories. And now Margaret Voss, the HOA president, decided it was a threat to her iron grip on our little community. It felt like being dragged into court in my own backyard. It was a crisp Thursday morning in October 2024 when trouble came knocking. I was savoring my coffee, watching mist curl off Willow Lake, when Margaret stormed down with 2 board members trailing her like nervous shadows. She wore a tailored blazer that screamed money and carried a stack of papers thick enough to choke a lawyer. Behind her was Paul Henley, a soft-spoken accountant who seemed to shrink under her glare, and another guy whose name I never caught because he barely spoke. The whole scene felt like a performance, staged for some invisible jury. Margaret didn't bother with small talk. "Mr. Whitaker," she declared, her voice sharp as a prosecutor's, "you've ignored 3 warning letters about your dock's violations of safety and community standards. As HOA president, I have the authority to order its immediate demolition." She waved her papers like they held the deed to my soul. My heart pounded, heat creeping up my neck. This was the dock where my daughter giggled through her first swim, where I scattered my dad's ashes. And now this woman wanted it gone in 24 hours, based on her say-so. "Warning letters?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I check my mailbox daily, Margaret. Nothing's come through. What codes am I supposedly breaking?" I gestured at my dock, simple, sturdy, weathered but solid. Her eyes narrowed, and her response hit like ice water. "I don't need county inspectors to make safety calls here. As president, I can override their procedures for emergencies." She thrust a violation notice at me, her tone implying she was doing me a favor by threatening my property. The paper was vague, full of buzzwords about community standards, but no specifics I could fight. Paul fidgeted, glancing at Margaret's own dock down the Sharia sprawling setup that looked more like a yacht club than a residential pier. Something was off, and it wasn't just her attitude. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked my dock, flashlight in hand, checking every plank, every bolt. What I found made my blood run cold. Several bolts were loosened, fresh tool marks gleaming in the light. This wasn't wear and tear. Someone had tampered with my dock to make it look unsafe. Rage mixed with dread. This wasn't about safety, it was sabotage, a setup to justify Margaret's crusade. Why me? Why my dock? I needed answers. The next morning, I went to my neighbor, Ed Riley, a retired contractor who knew building codes like I knew engines. I showed him the notice and explained Margaret's threats. His face darkened. "Tom, she skipped every legal step. Proper notices, 30-day response periods, board votes. She can't just declare an emergency and bypass the county. That's not how it works." Relief hit me, but it was quickly drowned by anger. If she was this far out of line, what was her game? I took a walk along the shore to clear my head and got a good look at Margaret's dock. It was a monstrosity, a 15-foot platform with exposed wiring, commercial-grade LEDs that lit up half the lake, and a sound system that could wake the dead. If anyone was breaking codes, it was her, not me. Back home, I pulled up my security footage from a recent party Margaret hosted for her grandson. The video was damning: kids playing near those exposed wires, fireworks shot off an unpermitted platform, and at least 30 people crowding a structure meant for a single family. In the background, Paul was quietly snapping photos, his movements careful, like he was gathering evidence while avoiding Margaret's radar. That's when it clicked. Paul wasn't just uncomfortable, he was building a case. I spent hours digging into HOA laws and county codes online, my coffee going cold as I read. Margaret's warning letters didn't exist. Her 24-hour ultimatum had no legal weight. She was banking on fear, not law, to get her way. But why target my dock when her own was a walking violation? The answer felt close, but I needed more. Friday morning, Margaret upped the ante. From my kitchen window, I saw her setting up a tripod, filming herself in front of my dock like she was starring in a true crime documentary. She pointed at my dock, her gestures dramatic, no doubt spinning a tale of my negligence for the neighborhood's social media. I wasn't about to let her control the narrative. I called the lake safety office, my hands shaking as I described her dock's hazards and sent them my photos. Then I called the county building inspector, half expecting them to brush me off. Instead, the inspector's voice was grim. Exposed wiring and unpermitted extensions? We'll be there today. My final call was to the state HOA board, where I filed a complaint about Margaret's abuse of power. Each call felt like a step toward justice, or a gamble that could backfire. By noon, a county truck rolled up to Margaret's property. I watched from my window as an inspector, clipboard in hand, approached her dock. A lake safety officer followed, his expression all business. Margaret's performance stopped cold. The inspector called her over, her voice cutting through the air. "Ma'am, we're here about building code violations and complaints against HOA management." Margaret's face went from smug to panicked. She tried to argue, her voice rising to a shriek. "I have jurisdiction here. You can't override HOA authority." The inspector didn't flinch. "County law trumps HOA rules, ma'am. All structures need permits." "That's state law, not your call." Neighbors started gathering, phones out, recording as Margaret tore at the violation notices posted on her dock, screaming about her rights. The crowd's gasps turned to laughter. Her empire of lies was crumbling. That evening, Paul's evidence folder changed everything. He'd documented months of Margaret's abuses, illegal threats, ignored violations, even HOA funds funneled into her dock's upgrades. At an emergency HOA meeting on Saturday, the community center was packed. Neighbors, once silenced by fear, spoke up. One elderly woman shared how Margaret forced her to pay $800 for fake violations. Another showed a voice message threatening fines for a non-existent parking issue. Paul laid out financial records proving Margaret used community money for her personal projects. "This isn't mismanagement," he said, his quiet voice carrying weight. "It's theft." The room erupted. Votes were unanimous. Remove Margaret, pursue criminal charges, and recover the stolen funds. Paul was named interim president, tasked with restoring trust. Monday brought the county's report: $12,000 in repairs and $8,500 in fines for Margaret's dock, plus $3,000 from the EPA for lake contamination. The DA's office confirmed theft charges, with Paul's evidence pointing to organized fraud. Her boat, displaced by the violations, racked up storage fees daily. I consulted a maritime lawyer, who explained that unpaid fees could lead to a lien and auction. The math was brutal: $32,500 total, more than most could handle. 3 months later, the auction day Evict, Chilly Tuesday in January 2025. The marina was quiet, save for 20 neighbors watching the proceedings. Margaret's boat sat on a trailer, a symbol of her greed. She pleaded with the crowd not to bid, promising to pay if given time. No one believed her. The auctioneer called for $32,500, the exact debt. My hand shot up, heart pounding. The crowd cheered, but no one else bid. "Sold to Tom Whitaker," the auctioneer declared. I walked to Margaret, her face crumpled in defeat. Holding up the keys, I said, "I don't want your boat, Margaret. I wanted you to feel what it's like when someone with real authority takes something you love. Mine was legal. Yours was a lie." I handed her the keys. "But you still owe every penny to keep it." The crowd gasped, then applauded. Justice wasn't just served, it was taught. 6 months later, Willow Lake was peaceful again. I sat on my dock, now the community's safety advisor, a role I never expected. Paul's leadership restored trust, with transparent meetings and clear procedures. Margaret moved away after a plea deal, paying restitution but leaving the boat behind. Neighbors laughed freely, no longer glancing over their shoulders. Mrs. Larson, an elderly resident, confessed she'd lived in fear of losing her home over fake violations. "You saved us, Tom," she said. "I didn't feel like a hero, just a guy who refused to let a bully win." But as I sipped my coffee, watching the sunrise, I wondered, would Margaret learn, or just find new victims? Peace isn't free. It's built plank by plank, truth by truth. So, tell me, what would you do if someone tried to tear down your sanctuary with lies? Would you fight, or fold under pressure? Would you show mercy to a bully who'd shown you none? Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop your thoughts below. Let's talk about what justice really means.